Hi, everybody. I see everyone is coming in.
Ooh, participants are joining up. Look at that. We've got like 18 now. They're just
Yeah, we'll just give it a minute for you guys to come in.
wait
Actually,
a
maybe
minute.
I'll
Is that
just
Paul
stop
Alvarado
sharing.
Dykstra? That's
for a moment.
Paul. Paul.
I told Paul that I was very nervous that he signed up. Hi, Paul. I know you're there somewhere. We were just talking about your podcast. We're going to talk about it now again. Um,
Yes. And he'll have to just listen to me say things that are completely inaccurate and suffer.
yeah. Okay, here's um he's already
Let's see.
causing troubles.
Nice. Paul, your usual understated self. Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. So we may as well oh, chat. Urgh, that is annoying. Thanks. Let me see what's happening. Oh, everyone. Um and let's voice everyone. Um okay, I'm not sure why the chat isn't able to work. Chat. Suzanne, just try now. I just want to check. Oh, I can send.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know. I'll have to figure this out. Okay, I'm gonna start.
Yes.
And in the meantime, I'm going to try and figure it out.
We're trying to see why some people are locked out of the chat, right?
Yeah, which is
Okay.
very irritating.
Right.
Okay.
But you can
All
look at
right.
that
So
while I speak voluminously about
yes.
God knows what.
Okay.
Okay.
So Kavi's going to tell you a bit about him, what he's doing in his life, besides his podcast, and yeah. Okay. So you go for it while I figure out
Shall I
this.
introduce myself?
Please do.
So hi everybody, I'm Javier Grillo-Marxuach. I am a writer, producer. I have been up until last week working on The Witcher, which on which I'm an executive producer. Before that, I worked on Cowboy Bebop for Netflix, Raising Dion for Netflix, The Dark Crystal for Netflix. I am probably best known as one of the inaugural writer producers of Lost. I have worked on, let's see, what else have I worked on recently that we can talk about? Shannara Chronicles was one of them, The 100. I did a reboot of Xena. That is what we're going to be talking about today. I do a lot of writing and teaching about screenwriting and also about ethics and conduct in the entertainment industry. Um, Currently, I have two podcasts. One of them is dormant. The other one launched, I think, 4 weeks ago. And my podcasting partner Paul is actually part of the conversation today. That podcast is called Multiplex Overthruster Summer of '82. And in it, me and Paul Alvarado Dykstra and producer Brad, who is mysteriously nameless other than that. Brad is one of my oldest friends. Paul and I have been friends for a long time. He is one of the inaugural bloggers of internet geek culture. And the podcast is us looking at the films of the summer of '82 and dissecting them week by week. And the summer of '82 was one of the greatest summers in genre. Our lineup of movies, literally the first 6 weeks are like Poltergeist, Star Trek 2, Tron, Blade Runner, Rocky 3, The Thing, really E.T., really sort of seminal movies, and The Road Warrior, for example. And it's sort of a way for Paul and I to talk about screenwriting and all of that, while having a much more specific subject. So it's just it's something that I hope you will check out. You can you can find that on podcasts at on Apple and wherever fine podcasts are to be found. And that is called Multiplex Overthruster Summer of '82.
And I just want to say it is the most brilliant podcast.
Oh.
It's become my Friday night entertainment. If you guys haven't listened, okay, they're all different, but the one I listened to last night was Grease 2, and it's hilarious. Paul and Javi seriously made me laugh, and they're giggling at the beginning. It's brilliant. But we'll leave it at that, and we'll get into why we're
The
here.
insane, I mean, it's funny because when Paul and I are talking about things we know about, like Star Trek 2, it's a pretty amusing podcast. When we're talking about something that confuses us utterly, like Grease 2, it's even funnier. So
Yeah, 100%. Anyway, okay, so guys, uh Javi's written a lot of essays, and we're going to tackle the one about how you write on the page.
mhm.
Maybe you want to caveat this or not. I mean, I'm not sure that it's like, this is definitely how it should be done, or if this
Well,
is more your vibe, or
well, Eve, like, so basically, if you were to, if you're on this chat and you were to go to my website, which is okbjgm.com, you'll find a downloads tab, and in there you're going to find my essays, and you're also going to find my scripts and Bibles and pitches and all of that stuff that I've put up. That's all up there for free. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not selling anything. And I don't think that anybody needs to look at anything that I write or say in this context as, anything other than one person's not contribution, but just one person's like testimony for how I did it. And the one of the things about how I did it is that I have failed many times. okbjgm.com.
I
The
actually had
letters.
it up here on my
Okay,
screen
great.
because I wanted to show
Yes.
people. So this is it.
Yes.
And there's lots of information here. It's
Yeah.
priceless. So
And
this is
and
where
pretty much,
the
yeah.
essays are.
Yep.
Yeah, and we
Yep.
are going to tackle this one, what I do on the page. But I'm
Yeah.
going to share
So,
my screen because I've highlighted a few things. Obviously, this is 40 pages. We're going to get through quite
yes.
a bit, but I wanted to start off with
hmm
something that really caught my eye, where you
hmm
say here, a script is a loan application.
Yes.
Yes, and you say most novelists know that their work will not be consumed in a single sitting. For a screenwriter, however, there can be no worse fate. Every time the reader pauses, the possibility of that
Yeah.
check getting signed dwindles. I think a lot of us would love the problem of potentially having the check being signed, but talk to us about that.
Well, okay. So one of the reasons I wrote this essay, for just to kind of take a slightly higher level view, is first of all, well, we'll talk about this later, but reading scripts is not the most fun, actually. And a lot of screenwriters sort of fall under the delusion. We're always taught this really stupid and toxic idea that a script is a blueprint. It's a blueprint for a movie, and a lot of people take that as, well, it's just a blueprint. It doesn't have to read great, you know. But the fact of the matter is that you need to create a reading experience for the reader that is going to give them an analog of what the movie is going to be, and you need to give them everything that they need to picture the movie in their mind through your prose. And the place where I find most screenwriting to be lacking is actually the way that prose is put on the page, the way that prose is deployed, and the way that things are described, the way that basically a script is a loan application, in that you're basically giving the script and saying to somebody, give me $100 million. you know
Yeah.
if you're writing a TV show like The Witcher, like like you're literally asking for somebody for $100 million. And you need to be able to show that you're going to create something memorable, and that is going to hook the audience, and the first person you have to hook is the person who's going to write the check. So if you give somebody a blueprint, it's a very different visual experience than if you give someone an experience. And what I'm saying with this essay is that your script has to be kind of a little work of literature in and of itself. It has to have its own poetics, it has to have its own aesthetics, and it needs to look good on the page, and it needs to read well on the page. And one of the ways that I do that is to be able to kind of guide the guide the viewer's attention through the page, so that I'm actually in charge of how quickly you are looking at this material. The way that I try to lay out scripts on the page, I try to, and it's something that is also informed by the writing that I did in comic books in the early to mid aughts, when I was working on things like Lost and The Middleman and some of the Marvel stuff I did, is how do you get the reader to not be able to not be able to stop, you know? And that's the thing. It's with a novelist, and that's the analogy that you brought up to bring it back to your question, Eve, is, a novelist knows that no one's going to read that book in one sitting. They know that you're going to put the book down, whatever, and they have a part of the writing of a novel is kind of knowing that every chapter stop, is going to either have a question or a cliffhanger or some dramatic interest that's going to pull you to the next one, even if you leave the book down overnight. The one thing you don't want is for people to forget the book. When you're writing a screenplay, you want that reader to just not be able to put it down. And that's not just because your script is great or your writing is great. There are physical strategies that you can deploy on the page to keep their eyes on the page. And that's kind of what this essay is all about.
Yeah, and also you say that because a lot of people have to read them in their spare time, like you say it's
Yes.
it's actually homework for them. It's not like they have like hours in the day to do that, and it's a tedious and soul-sucking job, I think, were your exact words.
Yes. Reading scripts sucks. It's, by the way, just someone put on the Richard Corman put on the chat that a real blueprint has to be perfect. Yes, it does. It has to be perfect. But that means that the HVAC plot and the electrical plot have to be perfect. That means that you have to demonstrate that the building can stand and all that. But that doesn't mean that you are conveying an aesthetic experience. Okay. A person who knows how to read a blueprint will know what to look for. But people pick up scripts who aren't necessarily engineers, who aren't necessarily architects, who aren't necessarily anybody who's a lot of it. Look, there are executives that I've dealt with very recently. One of them literally said to me, I said, oh, how long have you been working at X streamer, what network, whatever? And this person said to me, oh, like 2 months. I was actually working in tech and finance before I came here. So literally you've got a person who probably very intelligent, very well educated and all that, but they're literally picking up scripts and reading them like with no previous training, for how to do this and for what to look for. So yes, I'm not saying, I'm not throwing shade on blueprints as a genre. I'm throwing shade on the idea that a script doesn't have to be its own experience to be read, and that you don't, and you have to, when you write a script, you have to assume, again, because reading scripts is so difficult and so tedious and can be so technical, you're really kind of grabbing, you need to figure out how do you grab your audience without making any assumptions about what level they're approaching this material at.
Yeah, 100%.
You need to treat your audience like they've bought a novel or a comic book, or like they're literally popping a DVD, and how do you keep them watching,
Yeah, and I like how you've kind of taken your own spin on trying to make it look good on the page. So that's also
Absolutely.
interesting. So so yeah, there's something you also talk about here about good confusion and bad confusion.
Right.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that in terms of the format of the script.
Well, yeah, that's less about sort of how you lay out your words on the page and how you, sort of format your script, and more about how you look. One of the things that falls into laying your script out on the page and sort of being able to like keep the reader going and all of that is that all good drama has questions, cliffhangers, things like that, right? So a big part of it is, how do you disperse this information without confusing? I'm sorry, I'm just turning on my air conditioning. It's a little bit hot here in the San Fernando Valley. How do you keep the questions alive without stopping that person? So you've got your so basically the most prosaic way of explaining good confusion versus bad confusion is this, right? It's, I'm confused versus I'm confused, and it's sort of, and it's a term that Renee Echevarria, who was one of the writers on Star Trek and then Deep Space Nine, and later on one of the executive producers on Medium, he's sort of the one who taught me this term. And I think it's about asking questions where the reader keeps scanning for the answers instead of throwing up their hands in frustration, and I believe that I don't think every scene needs to end on a cliffhanger necessarily, but I think every scene needs to end on a question.
Like
And
a
frankly, usually,
curiosity. You want to be
excuse me?
curious.
Exactly. Yes.
Curiosity. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for me, good confusion, like, and working on Medium was actually a study in always creating good confusion. Because if you look at Medium as a viewer, right, it's a show about a psychic soccer mom who, every once in a while has a dream about a horribly gruesome murder, and works with the DA's department to solve it, right? That's the outside view when you go to watch Medium, right? When you go to write Medium, right? Medium is actually an exercise. So every episode of Medium started very similarly. You're in some sort of surreal dream scenario, right? And then usually the Patricia Arquette character wakes up, and then you cut to credits, right? So your teaser is usually, here is this oblique vision that the Alison Dubois character has had. How does this become a TV show? How does this become her solving a crime, right? And as a writer, Medium was a study in how to create a dream sequence that took Alison Dubois 1 hour to figure out.
It's quite
Right?
a challenge. That's quite a
That's the
challenge.
technical challenge, right? Yes, the,
Yeah.
the, the viewer challenge is, oh, hey, a nice mystery. I wonder what this dream is, right? So you're trying to create the good confusion of a surreal dream experience that you then realize this is a dream that this character is having that's going to lead to a crime that she has to solve within an hour, you know? So the technical requirement is very different from, the requirement, what you bring to it as an audience, which is, I want to be entertained. The technical requirement is, I need to create enough good confusion, right? That you're constant. And the thing about Medium versus a lot of other procedurals is that, especially procedurals that are more specifically about police and terror, like a Law and Order or something like that, is that the structure in Law and Order is, sort of you start a scene, you talk about what happened in the previous scene, you get new information in the scene, you conjecture about what the thing could be, and then you move on to the next scene. And when you're done watching an episode of Law and Order, the audience can sort of look at that episode and say, well, we didn't have all the information the cops had. You're
Right.
getting the information at the same speed that they are. In Medium, the good confusion was, how do we create a flow of information that is not linear? And maybe we're not always giving the audience all the information, but how do we keep them interested in knowing what it means?
Yeah.
And that's the difference, so whether you're looking at it as an episode of TV or a movie or a line in a script, a line that you write in a script, a line of prose that you write in a script, the whole idea of good confusion is you're always looking to keep, basically, pauses are death for scripts. Anytime your reader stops reading for whatever reason, you're putting a strike against you in that loan application.
Yeah.
You want to write a script where, literally the phone rings and the person's not going to stop reading to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
And good
100%.
confusion is a huge part of that, creating what I call good confusion.
Yeah. Thank
Um,
you. Thanks for that.
sure.
Yeah. Okay, so now you've got a script. I know you've got the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing in front of you.
Yes.
And one of the things, how do you say it? Xena.
Yes. Xena. Yeah.
Xena. Okay, so you wrote Xena, and from what I understand from the essay, it never got made, but you wrote this, and I'm
Yes.
kind of disappointed that it never got made. Or
Thank
maybe
you.
it will, because it
Mhm.
looks like my kind of thing, very epic. And I love how you talk about, like, you absolutely hated this
Yes.
slug line that you wrote.
Mhm.
Said, this is terrible, and every time I read it, I cringe for all the
I do.
opportunities missed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
So there is the slug line, and then
mhm.
you then talk about what you wish you had written.
Right.
So let's have a look at that.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so yes, you're looking at that in the so first of all, a couple things. First of all, if you take nothing else from what I'm about to from anything you hear today here, there are no hard and fast rules. Basically, writing is about communication, you know? So, people, so for example, one of the reasons I say that right now is because I'm looking at the slug line before I get into what the slug line actually says, and I bold my slug lines. Why do I bold my slug lines? Because I want you to stop and look at that. You're reading, 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 then I want you to kind of stop, look at that, make sure that you take it in, so that the bold, just as an aesthetic gesture, stops you. It doesn't stop you like I'm putting the script down, but it says, oh, this is important. I'd better stop and read this. And creating that sense of da 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 da, ooh, important, da 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 da. Okay, I got all this. Oh, here's another. Oh, the. So things like, for example, I bold my cut twos and my slug lines and my shot calls, okay? Because I want the script to look like it has a variety of different states of flow in it, you know? A slug line is a pause so that you can stop and figure out where we are, you know? A
It's also
transition.
easier on the eye. I also
Absolutely,
bold
yeah.
mine. I just feel like it's just much easier to read than just a wall of,
Mhm.
text that's all the same.
But right, like literally, I've been on week-long Twitter arguments with people about whether you underline slug lines or you bold them or you. It doesn't matter, honestly. What matters is what makes you feel like you've written a script that has that flow. And when people read your script, so they come back and say, "Wow, I read your script. It has a great deal of flow." At the end of this essay, I actually have scripts. I quote scripts from Shane Black and Lawrence Kasdan, right? The Shane Black script is might as well be Dada. You know, it's literally just it's this bizarro word salad. The formatting is all over the place, but guess what? It's awesome. And there isn't a single writer my age who didn't learn a huge amount of script writing from because Shane Black was the guy who sold the first $1 million spec. It was Lethal Weapon, you know, and The Last Boy Scout and all that. And the guy's writing also does something very differently than what a lot of writing does, which is that it puts you in the mood. It tells you it tells you how to feel without telling you how to feel. You know, the way that Shane Black writes, it just sort of creates this vibe, you know. And then you look at you look at Lawrence Kasdan's work, and there's a couple of things in that script. One of I think the script for Raiders Lost Ark is one of the greatest scripts ever written. I would have never written prose in a script the way Lawrence Kasdan does, you know. But I think that's also partially because he started working with the directors with George Lucas and Spielberg and Philip Kaufman from Jump Street. So Kasdan probably wasn't trying to step out the action the way that I do and things like that because they were probably already storyboarding that by the time he started writing a script, you know.
Yeah.
So there's different ways of doing this, and it's also different reasons why you have a script, you know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of considerations. So let's get to the slug line, okay?
Okay.
Exterior. So the reason I hate the slug line, it's first of all, it's like I think the first or second slug line in the script, and the first thing I throw at you is Thracian countryside, right? If you're not a scholar of geography and hallowed antiquity, right? Um, what does Thracian mean to anybody? You know, and I'm not thinking that people are stupid, they don't know what Thrace is or whatever, but it's like it's just a weird word that just sits there and it stops you. It stops you. It makes you just go like, huh, Thrace. What's I'm gonna go to Wikipedia, find out what is it Thracia? Is it Thrace? Is it Thracia? You know?
Didn't
Whereas
I
if I say
actually just ask you before
mhm,
we came on this how you
mhm.
say that? So there's the
Yes,
perfect
exactly.
example
Like
for
you
in the
actually asked me for
radio.
the
Yeah,
pronunciation. Yeah.
I did.
And that's death. That's just, and that's like the first slug line in my script. I fucking hate it because it's like the second version I give you, A Forest in Ancient Greece. Now that slug line is doing a bunch of heavy lifting, right? It's telling you what the physical location looks like a forest. Everybody closes their eyes. You know what a forest looks like. You know, there's trees and stuff. So, you know, we're a little bit, you know, you get a very clean idea of the visual if I say forest, you know. I say ancient Greece. Now I'm telling you when the script is set, you know. I'm telling you some idea that it's set in mythological times in antiquity, something like that. You kind of already get an idea that this is something that's mythological, that this is going to be sword and sandal, that it's just that you're just not Thracian countryside doesn't give you any of that. It doesn't tell you trees. It doesn't tell you there's a lot of cover that you're kind of sneaking around. It doesn't. It just gives you something to go look up on Wikipedia. And
Yeah.
for me, that's a slug line. That's a failure. You know.
I love this because it's actually so simple, but the way that you put what you hate and why A Forest in Ancient Greece is so much better. I mean, you can see it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that that kind of carries some weight for the
Yeah.
simplicity for all scripts going forward for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so so yeah, so that's great. I'm going to move on.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got an interesting way of sometimes introducing your characters.
Mm-hmm.
For example, You say, oh, did I not
A little bit.
highlight
No,
it?
earlier. I think you
Oh, it's
passed
on
the
page
script page.
11.
Yeah.
Wait, I put it here, page 11. You say, oh, we're talking about exposition. But, oh,
Introducing Hercules. You know his name.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, I'll find it now. It is further up.
I have it right here. I'll tell you. So
Okay.
here's it's literally right after Thracian countryside on the script. It goes
Oh,
exterior Thracian countryside night. The soldiers stop into torchlight strides their leader. So already I'm telling you how this person is entering the movie. They walk into torchlight, so it's from darkness and they resolve into the light. So already there's that, right? Now the description of the character gets a little more colloquial, right? You know his name. This is what's the prose on the page. You know his name, period. Synonymous with strength and virility, period. His appearance, dash from the cunning, brutally handsome eyes to the muscular shoulders, armored with the indestructible pelt of the Nemean lion, and powerful hands grasping a knotted club only a demigod could wield, bears out the legend, period. The next paragraph. This is Hercules, period. So, you know, I get a little colloquial in terms of I'm talking directly to you as the audience now, in terms of how I do this. And part of that is because I want you to. One of the ways that I develop my own personal voice as a writer, okay, is that I want you to know as a reader that you're in good hands. I want you to know as a reader that I'm in control of the narrative. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to see at at every moment, right? And in describing this character, I'm going to both describe him physically, but I'm also going to tell you how I feel about him. And by knowing that, you're going to know, sort of how to kind of look at this character, So like he's Hercules. We know that he is. We know that everybody knows who Hercules is. He's Superman before there was Superman. There was a show with Kevin Sorbo, and this is a remake of the spin-off of that show. So we all know that Hercules is involved here in some way. And at this point in the script, I want you to think Hercules is a good guy because he's in league with Xena, right? But I'm also going to give you a little bit of I'm saying he's cunning and brutally handsome, you know. So I'm also
yeah.
giving you a little bit. I'm also giving you a little bit of a, I'm giving you a little bit of an opinion there. But I'm also telling you, hey, I'm telling you the story. This is my voice. Hang tight with me. We're gonna get to everything.
And Javi, what do you think that new writers could get away
Mm-hmm.
with such things? Because it's kind of drummed into us that there are certain rules and formats we should follow. But do you think that would count against a new writer?
No, I
Obviously
think
you have
that
lots of experience, and
no, 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 no. Look, I
maybe
think I think that I'm sorry, Eve. I don't mean to interrupt you.
yeah.
I apologize. I'm sorry. Um, no, I mean, look, there is a format, but the point of what I've written, the 40 pages I've given you here, is that the format is very flexible and it's very fluid, and you get to, it's when you write a haiku or a villanelle, right? You have some forms that you have to adhere to, a certain number of syllables per sentence, a certain number of times you have to repeat the same refrain, a certain number of stanzas, that kind of thing, right? What I'm trying to tell you is that the format of screenwriting is no different from the format of a sonnet, the format of a villanelle, or whatever. Yes, it does have rules, but within those rules, you have infinite bandwidth to get away with it. I had a teacher, a writing teacher in college, a very, very nice man named Ted Wiesner. And one day he just said something that blew my mind. He said, good writing is whatever you can get away with.
Hmm.
And
No,
that is the ultimate.
that's cool. I mean, I'm glad that you said that, because I know that some writers are weary,
Mhm,
to break those rules, and I think it's
mhm,
comforting.
right.
Um, yeah, as long as you
So by
get
the
your
way, somebody in the webinar chat just said, like, so you do the descriptive slug, then the exact location with the setting at, right? No, like for example, your slug here, exterior mountainside battlefield in southern China, day, is a great slug line. I'm not saying you have to do X, Y, or Z. I'm saying a slug line that does double duty of telling the assistant director where the location is because ultimately that script is going to be used by the assistant director to figure out how many days you're shooting in each location, which is why you have slug lines, right? So, but so a slug line that does that, but also gives you an evocative picture of, it gives the reader an evocative picture of what they're looking at. That's a good slug line. It doesn't mean that you automatically put another piece of information in front of it that has to go in front of it or whatever. It doesn't, it's not so much about that. It's about how can you get every piece of prose in your script to carry the biggest amount of freight possible. And yes, there's a difference between a production draft and a reading draft. It's not that big a difference, because in your reading draft, you still have to show that you have a grasp of producibility. You have to show that you have a grasp of, you know, how to tell your actors who they're playing and why they're doing the things they're doing and all of that. So ultimately, the needle you're threading with a script is you are also creating a technical document. A script is your loan application, but it's also a work order, right? Because the slug lines tell the ADs how many days they're going to spend in any one location, right? Your script is telling basically the script is telling everybody what costumes to make and where to take all those trucks with all the cameras and crap in them, you know? So you're threading a bunch of needles at the same time. Good reading experience, technical document, show the reader that you know how to produce and how to write for affordability or for production and all that. I talk a little bit about $1 million sentences in this later, and I don't know if you have a I don't know if you have a question about this, but one of the things I talk about is that you don't want to write $1 million sentences.
Oh, about like lots of words.
Yeah, well, no, like $1 million
Oh.
sentence is the Indians storm the fortress and burn it down. That's one sentence. You put it in the middle of a page, and it's actually 20 minutes of screen time, and it cost $1 million to produce those 20 minutes of screen time, you know?
Yeah.
So you know, one of the things you're showing, right, in writing the script is that you can actually step out this information in a way that like completely sort of tells you everything that's happening. And there's another, I'm sorry, I'm rambling all over the place, but you know, when you talk about the flow of information on the page, part of the reason why this appearance of Hercules is at that length where we're looking at right now, right, is I'm also telling you this is an important character. Okay. So I'm going to take some space here because ultimately, yes, him coming into light and kind of talking to his men is only going to take a certain amount of screen time, but I want to make sure that you know that this entrance is important. This entrance matters, you know? So it's kind of like when Darth Vader enters in Star Wars, right? The first time you see him, you know, the stormtroopers come in, 2 stormtroopers stand to either side of the door, and he walks in through the smoke. I'm trying to show you that that's not like some other character who's a Shemp commander who's going to give Darth Vader a piece of information, right? It is about a big character entering the scene, and that requires time, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I am telling you here, this is the cycle. This is it, when you think about space and time as described in prose in a script, I am telling you the film has to pause here to linger on this character so that you know that he matters.
Yeah, I like that $1 million line. I didn't make a note of that, but that's awesome.
Don't write
So
$1 million lines. Or write $1 million
yeah, maybe
sentences,
not
you
too
know?
many of those.
Yeah. But look,
I mean,
the other thing that you know, when you look at just this introduction of the characters, right? The soldiers stop, and to Torchlight strides their leader, right? And then I give you the paragraph, you know, one paragraph of information about him. I tell you what he's wearing and all that. I give you a second to kind of take in his physical appearance. And then I say he looks past to the trees to see. And one of the things that you'll see here just very early on in the script is, in apropos of the $1 million lines, right, is that I look at every paragraph in the script, and this is my own very personal and idiosyncratic way of writing, but it's what I call a bit. Okay, this is not a technical term. This is a term I just made up, right? Somebody just wrote, my teacher says no paragraphs longer than 2 lines. Thoughts? Bullshit. Write paragraphs as long as they have to be for what you're describing. Every paragraph for me is a bit. To me, a bit means here is what is in front of the camera. Okay? Here is what your eye needs to see that is important. And I'm not telling you, right? One of the things, for example, that I do, and this is also came for me out of writing comic books, and it's not hard and fast, it's not in every paragraph, but I try to not change the field of vision in a single paragraph, right? So I say, you know, the soldiers stop into torchlight strides their leader. Then I don't say ahead of them is this giant castle, right? Because you're seeing soldiers and the guy walking in between them into the torchlight, right? If I start telling you what they're looking at in the same paragraph, all of a sudden I'm telling you the camera's seeing this, but oh, here's a cut to something else, right? So I usually give you one angle of information in one paragraph, and then I move to the other angle of information, you know? So if you look at this paragraph right here that you have on screen, this is Hercules. He looks past the trees to see. So he walks into frame. You see him in the light. You see he's wearing the line, da, da, da. And then he looks, and the next paragraph tells you what he's looking at, you know, so that you know exactly what is in the frame at every given time, right?
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the bits, because I actually made a note of that, that you make quite
Mm-hmm.
a strong point about the flow of
Mm-hmm.
things. And I
Yeah.
wanted you to kind of elaborate on that. So
Mm-hmm.
so that's what you mean about
Mm-hmm.
the different, just making one visualize exactly
Mm-hmm.
where the cameras are going to go.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Because the technical part of writing a script, a lot of it is not just telling the actors what they're playing and all of that, but you're giving your reader also, look, you don't direct, you know, like nobody likes directing on the page. Ooh, don't tell me where to put the camera, you know? I'm not directing on the page. I am telling you what the mood is. I am telling you how you're supposed to feel, and I'm telling you what I'm giving you information at the same rate that I think the camera should be giving it to you. I'm not telling you at what angle. I'm not telling you, but I'm telling you
Yeah,
that, like,
yeah.
you know, this is a cut to this. This is a cut to that. Here's this information, right? This is all you need to know what's happening now. Uh-oh, something changed. Here's what you need to know now, you know? In this introduction of Hercules, I don't need you to see what he's looking at just yet. I need you to know he's coming into frame and looking awesome. Then you can figure,
For
then I can tell
sure.
you what he's looking at, you know?
For sure. No, that's cool. Then I want to just move on to what I find quite interesting is the dual dialogue. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just yeah, I
Sure.
think that's on page 16.
Mm-hmm.
I seem to be jumping around a bit here, but never
That's
mind.
okay.
Oh, here
Well,
we
here it
go.
is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Talk to
So
us
now
about
look,
this
this
dual
drives script
dialogue.
coordinators in this drives script coordinators that I work with insane. This is my own highly idiosyncratic way of putting things down. I do not necessarily recommend that you do anything the way that I do. Uh, I use dual dialogue because not because I want the actors to talk over each other necessarily, but because I want the actors to know that there is an escalation of the rhythm of the scene here. So if you look at specifically this conversation here, Xena, this is not smash and grab. The mayors of Diomedes are feral. Aeolus kicks in and he's like, they eat the flesh of, you know, so like, and then Xena cuts him off, right? So what I'm saying is these characters aren't talking on top of each other, but this is a part where literally the dialogue goes boom, 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 you know? I'm trying to make your eye do this so that your eyes aren't just doing this. I'm trying to tell you these people are cutting each other off because they're all having very fast opinions about things, you know? So now in this, so one of the things that I've started to do and how I lay out dual dialogue, because this does confuse script coordinators and they don't like it, is if you see, so I have Aeolus saying they eat the flesh of, and then there's the Xena dialogue call, and then there's a space there, right? Which to me, in my visual imagination, says that's the space occupied by Aeolus's line, right? But Xena's going to step right on that dash and talk, right? One of the things I do now, in order to clarify whatever confusion is going on, there's that instead of putting a space after the character call or the character name, I'll put a parenthetical in there. So if I were writing that script today instead of in 2016, which I think is when I wrote it, they eat the flesh of, and Xena's dialogue would read Xena, parenthetical, losing her patience, you know, so that you know that she's cutting him off, you know. But for
Yeah.
me, and it may not work for you. And again, it's like so many things that you do in any type of writing may not work for another person. So, you know, this is like an AA meeting, guys. It's like take what works for you, leave the rest in the room, okay? Um, but the idea is that I want you to see an escalation here, you know. um I want you to see that that the scene is picking up in its pace, that the characters have a relationship where they cut each other off, they're not entirely respectful of each other, and this is my way of kind of giving you all of that information in a very quick way, you know.
Yeah, I feel that it sets like a very quick pace.
Mhm.
It just kind of bumps us up
Yeah,
the pace a little bit compared to the rest of the script, and you get
right.
that quite quickly.
The other thing that I say in the essay, Eve, is that, like, what you really want to avoid above all things is having blocks of prose interrupted by blocks of dialogue, because what'll happen is that your reader will avoid the prose and only read the dialogue in the hopes that the dialogue will catch them up on what's happening physically, right?
Yeah, and you actually mentioned that in the beginning of the essay,
Mm-hmm.
is that you said a lot of readers actually kind of skip the action and just read the dialogue, which was a little
We all
horrifying.
do. Yeah. There's two kinds of readers: the ones who'll admit that they'll skip the prose and read the dialogue to catch up, and then liars. Because at some point, script reading is, I mean, look, with apologies to everybody, like, script reading is just difficult, partially because a lot of the time you're picking up material written by people who don't realize that they're actually trying to sell you something and entertain you, you know you're reading material written by people who think, well, just as long as I tell you, what the story is and the dialogue, you're fine, whatever. No, you need to make the experience entertaining. And we all want to do it quickly. We all want to, like, get through it. We all want to know if the script's any good or not, or whether we have to write good coverage or not. And my entire mandate here, right, is how do you write a script and stop the person from doing that without them feeling like you're tripping them up, with them
Yeah,
feeling like this is part of the entertainment experience of the read.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I get that. I enjoyed reading that. Um, so I'm just going to go back a little bit because I skipped over exposition, which
Sure.
I think is super
Ah,
important.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Here we go. You say your job isn't to mirror the way people talk in reality, but to convince the reader of a reality in which people talk the way you write them.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, look, I get into arguments with, so, like, I love Patty Chayefsky. I love Amy Sherman Palladino. Um, I would love Aaron Sorkin and Joss Whedon a little bit more if I, didn't know so much about some of the ways they can be personally. I love Howard Hawks. I love Ben Hecht. I love, Billy Wilder, right? And I get into arguments with people who talk about naturalistic dialogue. This is the way people talk. I mean, if I wrote scripts the way people talked, they would be the most boring scripts ever. People would talk in sort of halting half sentences. They'd say a lot, and they'd never agree to anything, you know? Because I literally, in meetings, hell, I mean, in talking to my wife, or talking to, like, a waiter, like, I literally at this point end my human interactions by saying, okay, we've agreed to this, to that, and to the other thing. We good?
Yeah.
Because after being around for 54 years and trying to have relationships with people, I realize half the time you have a conversation with somebody, they don't know what you agreed to, you know? So,
Notice that about you. Every time you and I've spoken, you
yeah.
always recap and you go, let me check that I've understood what you've said. And I find it
Mhm.
quite impressive, I must say.
Yeah. Well, so embrace the fact that you are not writing anything that's real. Now, you can try to convince me that this is real and raw and this is how people talk or whatever, but you're inventing shit. You know, all writing is artifice, straight up, no chaser. Nobody writes documentary style dialogue, because the moment you write dialogue, you are putting your artistic stamp on something. Okay. So all good scenes have a beginning, a middle, and an end. All good scenes usually have a button, you know. Um, your job is to try to disguise from the audience that you're giving them an experience that's very sort of formulaic that way. But if you take, for example, like, I wrote the show called The Middleman, and this show aired in 2008, right? And everyone in The Middleman talked like a neurotic, overeducated Puerto Rican person. Okay, because who was writing that show? A overeducated, neurotic Puerto Rican person, right? That doesn't mean that I was not aware that I was writing every character that way. I made a very deliberate choice to have the language be very arch, very rhythmic, and, very sort of dense with references, with arcana. The thing that made it work is that within that, every character had a distinctive way of being, a distinctive personality, and entered every scene wanting something, you know? And it's the same with Gilmore Girls. If you watch Gilmore Girls, I mean, every character in that show talks the same. But what makes them different is they are all very quirky in their own individual way. The dialogue serves that. And, you know, when the show is good, you're always talking about characters who come into a scene with a desire and all of that, right?
Mm.
So, you know, for me, it's that. And in terms of exposition, you know, what you want to avoid is people saying to each other things they already know, you know. And I have a line from Heroes that I use as my gold standard for shitty exposition. And I think it's a little bit further down in this page here.
Yeah.
I don't have the essay in front of me, but you do. It's a
I actually wrote it down. Is it Mahinda, listen to me. Your father was my colleague and my friend. This one.
yes, that one.
Yes. Yeah, your father was my colleague and my friend, a respected professor, a brilliant geneticist, but he lost touch with reality.
Okay, so that is the worst line of expository dialogue ever written by any human being. You know, it just is. I'm sorry to Tim
I'm fine.
Kring. I
Yeah.
apologize. Tim Kring has been a fine writer in many, many other settings. This sucks. Why does it suck? Because it's literally it's literally a character telling the other character everything the other character already knows for the benefit of the audience, right? Um, writing that expository dialogue, you know, is an art in that you're trying to create a dramatic scene where and look, and this line of dialogue took place in a dramatic scene, you know. It was Mohinder's friend trying to get him to let go of some mad idealistic crusade he was on or some crap like that, right? Which is fine, except that when you put it this prosaically and you basically hit it on the head this way, and it's not the style of the rest of the dialogue in the show, the audience just hears that line and says, "This is a clam," you know. This line's a clam. It's just a terrible, just sticks in your mouth. You're like, you know, you know, it's just like slime coming out of your mouth, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, you know, like, and again, I'm not saying that I'm a great writer, a better writer than Tim Kring or whatever. I'm saying in this instance, he really kind of, and in the opening scene of the Xena pilot, I'm trying to explain to you that these characters are doing Hercules' 12 labors, that they were doing this for this king, that the you know, that if you know the mythology involved, you know Hercules' labors, you know where they're at and all of that. But I'm trying to make it more clipped, and I'm also trying to make it more about just one character trying to ameliorate the other character's fears. You know, it's more about that, you know.
Mm, mm,
um and I think that when you're giving exposition, you need to couch it within trying to explain to somebody, to your audience, who the other characters are, you know. So in terms of giving this exposition, one of the things I'm trying to get to you to see is that Hercules is the boss, Xena is the rebel, and Iolaus is the slightly cowardly minion who questions everything, right? And that
mm.
doesn't mean he has to have everything explained to him, but in the course of ameliorating his cowardice is where the exposition comes in. That's what I'm trying to do here, you know?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's cool because I think a lot of writers, exposition is always something that sort of gets left behind, but it's critical,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to round things off properly.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so then I want to move on to parenthicals.
Mm-hmm.
I liked what you described about the status quo essentially as to
Mm-hmm.
where things are if the actor is reading your script. How do you see the parenthicals playing their role?
Well, you know, it's funny. So I was listening to Ed Zwick's book, which is a pretty cool book, actually. I think it's called Hits, Flops, and Other Delusions or something like that. It just came out. And Ed Zwick, you know, one of the creators of 30 something, directed The Last Samurai, directed Glory, you know, just a really interesting filmmaker who's been around a long time, done a lot of work. Um, and he talks about studying with a woman named Nina Foch, who was actually a teacher at USC when I was at USC, and I took her class. And one of the things Nina taught us was that, you know, when an actor looks at a line, right, they're trying to figure out the action of the emotional action of the line, you know. And and she gave us 3 papers of three sheets of just prompts, and the one I remember is taking his temperature, you know, so that when the so instead of so my parentheticals, what I try to do with them now, and it's not across the board and something, but I try to kind of give the actor an intention, with the parenthetical rather than say beat or he pauses, comma, then or whatever. It's like I try to give the actor a piece of direction that isn't saying say it this way, but it's here's what you're doing when you say this, and to now I almost there's times in parentheticals where sometimes I actually write what they actually mean. So like I'll have a long line, but the parenthetical will be, oh, for shit's sake.
Oh, I love that.
Which is this is what you're saying. You're saying all
Yeah.
these words, but what you're really saying is, oh, for shit's sake. And you can give me your interpretation of, oh, for shit's sake, but that's
Yeah.
what this line is,
Okay. No, I
or
love
that
that.
this, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's almost like a little mini action line. It's
Yes.
just like,
Yes.
in the shortest possible
Mhm.
way. I think
Right.
it's pretty genius, actually.
Well,
Um,
sometimes look, like I was just writing on the last script that I was writing for Witcher. There's a scene where a character is kind of talking to another character, and the other character is telling him some very outlandish stuff. And there was a lot of blocks of prose describing, oh, this character takes a step back, wondering if this character is, wondering about their mental state and all of that. And then I just cut all of that out, and I just wrote a parenthetical that was, then the parenthetical read, holy shit, she's crazy. This is what I'm real as I say this,
yeah.
this is what I'm realizing, and this is why I'm saying it this way,
Yeah. Just
and look, I think
get your vision across.
yeah. Yeah, and look, a lot of what I have learned in the time that I have spent sort of just learning my craft is there was a guy named Michael Piller who was the showrunner of Star Trek The Next Generation after its second season. And he's somebody that I've looked up. I did actually not know him, but I met him once. I did one script for The Dead Zone, and I wasn't very good at it. So I didn't have a great experience there. Nothing to do with Michael as a person. But one of the things that Michael taught all of his writers, and that has sort of trickled down to me through other writers who worked on Star Trek that I've worked with and all of that, is the idea that all scenes should be doing double duty. Expository scenes should scenes should have some element of interpersonal character drama. The exposition is being given to actually further a piece of interpersonal drama, right? So that the scene's carrying the scene's doing double duty, And I think that when you start looking at slug lines, parentheticals, lines of dialogue, all of that stuff, the question you should ask yourself is, on how many cylinders is this piece of prose firing? Is it, like, again, a forest in ancient Greece, like that's carrying a lot of freight, and that's why I like that slug line. It's
Yeah.
giving you a lot of information in a very simple way and all of that. And I think parentheticals are the same way. I think lines of dialogue should be the same way. What are the many purposes this is serving? That's, important. And
Well,
also, somebody says,
yeah.
I've been told to use parentheticals as little as possible. Do you agree? No. I mean, if they work, use them. If they don't work, cut them out. And that's the thing, is that, like, everybody who teaches screenwriting is going to tell you that you should do X, Y, or Z to win the game of screenwriting. You win the game of screenwriting by successfully communicating the tone, theme, and story of your project on the page. And if you have to use fewer parentheticals, great. If you have to use more of them, great. You're writing something that has very spare prose and very spare characters, and that it's mostly, you're writing a Kelly Reichardt film, right? You're writing Meek's Crossing or Certain Women, then your script might actually be a little bit more spare and have less parentheticals and less kind of thick description and all that. You're writing a Patty Chayefsky movie, your dialogue will be really dense, and maybe you won't have the parentheticals because the dialogue is so dense that it describes everything you need to describe. There is no formula. Here's a bunch of tools, And the reason this essay is 40 pages is because I'm telling you, here's how I took these tools and decided to use them. Here's how I array them in the little pegboard, and here's when I use each individual tool. You might do it completely differently, but the ultimate task is give somebody a great experience of reading a story, make them read every word of the story, and then make them write you a check for $100 million. It's really simple.
No, 100%, totally simple. But I
Yeah.
love that you brought up Michael Pillar, because there was also something else that you said, that Michael Pillar said that you was a big influence. He
Mhm.
says words are the enemy. The more
Yeah.
words you use, the more
Yeah.
words the reader has to process, the more words the reader has to
Mhm.
process, the longer it takes to become involved in the narrative, and the easier it is to fall out of the narrative. Kill
Mhm.
as many of the enemies as possible.
Yes.
And I think this is interesting because, you know, I mean, it becomes like the craft of screenwriting is hard. So have less words, but say what you need to say, but choose them
Mhm.
carefully.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
No, I think, look, and I don't always agree with the way that that was deployed. Michael, the person that I heard this from was a writer named Hans Beimler, who worked on Next Gen and also on DS9, and it was in the context of these characters talk too much, you know.
mm,
So for me, I was working on a show where the characters talk too much was the gesture of the show, you know. So words are the enemy did not work as well for me in that context, but in terms of writing this, but it may work better in the context of a show like Star Trek: The Next Generation, where you're trying to convey a different type of reality that's more, you're trying to convince people that people from look in the middleman. I was trying to convince people that people from the 21st century talk like this, in the Star Trek shows, you're trying to convince people from the 20th century that people from the 23rd century are relatable. So you might want to write people from the 23rd century a little bit more curtly and a little bit differently, So it also depends on what your aims are. But in terms of your prose, the least, hang on, I must say goodbye to my wife. Uh, but in terms of your prose, like the least words you use and the most work every single one of those words use, the better. The more freight every one of those words carry, the better. Everything in your script should be working at multiple angles at once, trying to give as many different vectors of information. Information isn't just so one of the things we talk about in The Witcher, right, is that it's based on a series of novels written by a Polish author. And that sort of Eastern European weary pessimism is infuses every part of The Witcher. And it's one of the things that gives you that Witcher tone, you know, that gives you that kind of Witcher darkness, is that we are working with Eastern European folktales, we're working with an Eastern European sensibility. Nothing is completely happy because Andrzej Sapkowski, who wrote the novel, says that I don't remember who he was quoting, but he said that one of his favorite quotes is that life is the misery we endure between disappointments. Okay, so that's the point of view of the man who wrote the novels we're adapting, right? So I'm writing a script of The Witcher, and our streamer had asked us for clear victories, clear wins, and all of that, right? So I'm writing in the script, and I write, the scene where the Witcher has won, and it's great, and I'm like, and I'm writing, and I'm really pouring it on. I'm like, it's like a scene out of a Western in quick cuts, feet go into stirrups, and da 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 da, and they get on their saddles and they're riding away triumphantly, blah blah blah. But then I write, is this clear win, this moment of complete victory, the end of this episode of this episode? Is this the final moment on which we're going to leave our audience? And then I cut to another paragraph, and the next paragraph just consists of the line, "Bitch, please, this is The Witcher."
so you
Okay.
actually wrote that question like in
Yes.
the script.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reason I did that is it's just because I want the reader in this case, like to realize like this is not a show about clean victories, okay? And I'm not calling them a bitch. I'm not. But it's more just using the expression, but saying like making sure that when this scene is directed, when this scene is put together, and when whoever does the cut from one scene to another does it, that the tone we're putting here is, oh, you think this is great? Well, life is the misery we endure between disappointments. Here's the darkness of what follows. This is not the end of this episode because this is not the type of show that ends this way.
Mm,
And so we're going to go to this next scene and then the scene after that. And we're going to really put in the screws and let you know that
mm.
we may have won, but there's still really bad shit going on in the world. And the Witcher's quest isn't over,
Yeah. No, I love it. That's
So
awesome.
even editorializing like that with the script is serving a tonal function. And you see
Mm.
that kind of editorializing in the Xena script. You know, like when Hercules comes in and I'm like, you know his name. Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, this guy's a legend. We're giving him a legendary entrance, but then I'm also saying brutal and cunning. So I'm saying, you know his name, but this might be a little different than you think. But I'm not going to let you in on that yet.
Keeps you
But
reading.
basically,
Keeps you
but I'm
reading
showing
because
you,
you want to see.
I know the tone, I know the story I'm telling. Trust me, come with me, and I'm gonna also try to amuse you conversationally while I do this.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's cool. Thanks for sharing that. Um, so now I want to talk about passive voice.
Mhm.
So you say the passive voice is downright lethal. Why? Because
Yes,
as I've said ad nauseum, screenwriting is a description of motion and emotion in real
yes,
time.
yes.
So yeah, give us an example, like
Well,
what
I've
you
also been told that what I'm talking about technically is not the actual passive voice. So actually, can you go up, because I want to actually
oh,
find that the
uh,
where you were just at.
oh
Because somewhere
no.
in there somebody told me, like, it's not the passive voice, you idiot. It's called this other thing. So please don't let's see, where's the
That was
parenthetical,
parenthetical.
emotional, I don't know. So I there may there is a revised version of the essay that called, yes, exactly, thank you. The point being, whenever you say Javi is standing on a floor and ointment is being applied to his bald head, right?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. It's at the
Right?
end. Yeah.
Yeah. Every time that you use that construction, blank is blanking blank, right? You're using three more words than you have to. Javi stands, right? It's not Javi is standing, right? And this is, again, my own idiosyncratic, but every time you give me more words, you're slowing me the fuck down. And I don't want to be slowed down, right? Um, and so it's like anytime something is doing to something, right? As opposed to something does, right? Because like I said, scripts are a description of emotion and both emotional and physical motion in real time, right? You're literally describing 24 frames a second, moving, right? So whenever you say something like, where's the, let me see, I should actually just call up the essay on my computer so I can, but anytime, and the worst version of it, oh my God, the one that, like, literally I will throw your script across the room and everybody does
Begins
it and it
to.
drives me batty, is begins
Begins
to.
to.
Javi
So
begins to drink. No,
I,
I don't begin to drink. I lift the cup to my lips. I drink. I'm doing a motion, but if it's how do you begin to drink? You either drinking or you're not. You know,
so
begins to are two words that literally, it's like if you put two black frames in the middle of a second of film. It's like they
so
short
I love
circuit
it
me.
that you say here. You say this phrase annoys me beyond all reason and accountability. I actually
Yes,
highlighted it.
yes, yes.
Um, and then you also actually say, um, you say, if I have to write more than one sentence denouncing the majority of instances the word suddenly as an abdication of your responsibility as a writer, then what was the point of even living? I
Well, yeah,
literally
there's that. Yeah.
laughed out loud when I read that because that was
I mean,
was
look, I can be.
said with here, there.
Suddenly is the worst thing you can write. Like, I don't, I mean, honestly, like, just banish that word from like, every time somebody goes suddenly, I'm like, that's another fucking word I gotta, like, read. Whereas if you say, you know with an awful sucking sound, the fortress is driven under the ground. That's sudden enough for me. I'm getting it. When you tell
But
me suddenly, you're telling.
you're getting a big image, and it's worth so much
Suddenly
more.
is the tell don't show of action. You're telling me how to feel before you're telling me how to feel about anything.
Yeah, yeah.
I would rather have a shot call that says smash cut to blank than to say suddenly, because at least that way I'm making your or transition, because at least instead of saying suddenly, I'm driving your eye here. Smash cut to smash. What the fuck to,
I,
um
so
it's it's
I skipped over the transitions just from a
Mhm,
timing perspective, but now you're talking about it. So talk
mhm,
to us about how you do transitions, because you do them a little differently to
mhm.
most people,
Yeah.
or to whatever is the expected thing. Yeah, I'll just go to that
Well, look,
page.
transitions in sort of classic screenwriting are every scene has a cut to at the end of it, because it tells you that you're cutting from one scene to the other. I try to use transitions as sparingly as possible, and I try to use them for effect. Like, for example, instead of suddenly, I will use a smash cut to, because smash cut to is formatted on this side of the page instead of this side of the page, right? So that makes your eye do this, right? But if you look at the ones here, dissolve to Zena's eyes, right? That's a transition. But I'm using that space on the page to do two things. I'm using that space on the page to tell you what you're dissolving to before I even give you the slug line, so that, because it also connotes a certain mood, um, and I think that's sort of where, like, I think that transitions are a space for that a lot of people just used to say, oh, we're cutting to this, where this is the end of the scene. I use them to say, this is not just the end of the scene, but here's a preview of how I want you to feel in the next scene, right?
Mm.
Which is why will you give me one moment? I'm so sorry.
No worries. Cool.
I apologize. This is a webinar. I should not be telling this person where we're supposed to have lunch.
It's okay, life happens. Yeah, because we add an hour and there's so many questions. And guys, I just didn't look at the chat or your questions. Thank goodness Javi's checking it, because I didn't want to go page because I
Absolutely.
was sharing. So yeah, teamwork. And I do want to get to some of your questions. I've
Yeah.
actually you spoke about Shane Black. I
Mhm,
laughed at your description of it, because you gave an extract in the essay of what you believe is a more,
mhm.
what did you say? What you believe is a more holy mess, but it's the but that I want to talk
Yeah.
about. So that's interesting. I mean, you're saying it's such a great script, but it's a holy mess.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but look, and I think that's the reason why those scripts sold for $1 million when they sold for $1 million. That's why they set that, because they were, not only was look, Shane Black ultimately is sort of the godfather of the buddy cop movie, but I mean, the buddy cop movie owes as much to the front page, the Howard Hawks, I think Howard, Billy, anyway, the Howard Hawks movie, uh, you know, it's an old trope, two mismatched people doing a job together. What Shane Black gave to it, and to things like The Last Boy Scout and all that, is that he literally he's so good at connoting the kind of swinging style of his movies. And he uses the prose so well to do that. And at the same time, it's not how I would write a script. It's not how I would command my crew to move their trucks around and all that. But you know, and I'm sure that the assistant director, the guy who actually had to break the script down and figure out how many days they were going to be in what set, probably pulled his hair out or hair out, and is probably in an insane asylum right now. Um, but the script is incredibly evocative, and it does everything in a completely different way from how I do it. It shows you how to achieve that goal of just getting your reader in and just keeping them entertained.
Yeah. I like that you sort of, kind of close off with that, because it just kind of brings it all together, that at the end of the
Hmm.
day, these are things you can do,
Hmm.
or should do, but then you can just do what Shane Black did, and just a
Yeah.
holy mess, but it worked brilliantly. So I mean, it's like life. Nothing is like black or
Yeah.
white or simple. So
No.
I really enjoyed that reference.
And again,
And
Eve, it's the thing I said earlier, and I can't say it enough. Screenwriting is not a format, and it's not a formula. It is a series of tools that exist for a reason. We have slug lines to tell the assistant director what is in daytime, what is in nighttime, and where we're supposed to be, and then they read the scene and decide how long it's going to take to shoot the scene. So also, how you distribute time and the flow of information in your script has to kind of indicate that, you know.
mm,
But
yeah.
within fulfilling those goals, you have a whole tool rack at your disposal, and you don't have to use it the way everybody else has in the past.
Mm. No, I think that's a great takeout for this webinar. I hope
Mhm.
others feel similarly, but it also just gives one a little bit of I don't know, you know, we're all creative people and we want to be able to express that. And you know, it's a bit like maths sometimes, but to just be able to kind of sense that there's a bit of freedom to have one's artistic abilities put
Yeah.
on the page is quite refreshing. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you one last question before we move on to Q&A. I know we're over an hour, guys, but I do want to get to some of your questions. Um, so what scripts do you believe are the most well written? And maybe, yeah, I don't know.
You know,
Maybe since you wrote this, you've got different views or you've seen something. I don't know. I'm just interested to know because obviously now we're all going to go find them, right?
I think I'm telling you right there. I mean, look, I think I love the way Shane Black writes. I love reading his scripts. I don't like a lot of his views on humanity, you know, but I think he's a wonderful writer. I think honestly, like, I can't tell you that I think that the scripts that I necessarily like to read are not all great examples of this or that or the other thing. You know, they're just scripts that I've liked. I always get something out of reading Rod Serling's work. I always get something out of reading Patty Chayefsky's work. You know, and I don't necessarily think, oh, they wrote the best prose, they wrote the best this or that or the other thing. The way that they write just appeals to me, you know. So I think it's really difficult to, you know,
Yeah.
I
No,
think
I was just
the
interested if there was one that just kind of like stood out, but clearly Shane Black's one did because you
yeah,
mean
but I
um
always go back to the script for Network, you know, and
mm,
it's a film that was written in the 70s. It's more than a little bit sexist. Um, there's frankly a couple of digs at the Black Panther Party there that I find a little cheap. But you know what? I like the way Chayefsky writes dialogue. I write the way that he sets up his scenes. He tends to be kind of a bulk paragraph writer too. I mean, he doesn't do a lot of the things that I say that I want to do or do,
mm.
but his dialogue is so propulsive that it carries me to where I need to be, you know? And I
Yeah.
guess that's the whole thing. It's like it just depends on what sends you, and you should be writing. And look, I feel like that I learned more about this. I figured out my voice as a screenwriter more from writing comic books than I did from reading other writers' scripts.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
Because
because
it was
writing the
from writing
dialogue. Yeah.
and it was from writing comic books that I got this idea that, you know, oh, okay, when I was writing comic books, one of the things that's interesting about comic books is you can't describe motion when you write comic books. You can describe what's happening in a panel, but you can't say Steve storms out of the room and slams the door shut because you can't do that in a single panel, right? And it was from doing that that I sort of figured out the bits of information part of how I write. You know, if you realize, oh, I can really only show whatever's right in front of you, and that's the only thing I can describe at a moment in order to tell you what's happening in the movie, that's not dissimilar to the constraints of what you can do in a single still image and how the next image tells the story of the previous image and the name of and the story of the image
Mm.
after that, you know.
Yeah,
So
that's a very interesting kind of take on it, comic books.
that's what I do.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. Can we go to a couple of questions here?
I'm right here.
Okay, let's see. Okay, Hannah says, I recently received feedback that scripts should have 50% action and 40% dialogue. Is this an industry
Whoever gave you
standard?
that feedback is a moron. You don't have to listen to anything they have to say. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Hey, guess what? You can only have 40%. What? What if you need more?
Yeah. No,
Like
okay.
maybe 40% dialogue doesn't get, I mean, if somebody had told Patty Chayefsky he only could have 40% dialogue, then where's the I'm mad as hell speech fit into that? You know, it's no. Look, people don't believe anybody who tells you there's hard and fast rules. Don't believe
Yeah.
anybody who tells you that. They don't, they are trying to, you know, they might as well tell you, you know, like, I mean, are there some hard and fast rules? Yes, you have to have slug lines. You have to have character names before your dialogue, you know. After that, you know, you use transitions on this side of the page. You can either bold or underline your slugs or both, but they have to be all caps. Everything else is optional, right? Those are hard and fast rules. Everything else is up for grabs.
Yeah, yeah. I think
And yeah,
mm,
don't, I mean, look, I'm sorry if I called the person who gave you that feedback a moron. That wasn't nice of me. But it just gets my goat when especially if somebody is teaching you how to write, and especially if you're paying for instruction, that anybody tells you this is how it must be done. There is not, nobody tells you this is how you write a novel. You need to have exactly these many chapters, right? What they tell
yeah,
you is you need to have, like so many words or more. And beyond that, you may not even have to have chapters, you know? It's just not, and look, I think that because writing is a rarefied space in which to enter professionally, you know? And especially in the last 24, 25, 26, 27, 30 years, with the rise of the internet, with the rise of a kind of celebrity writer culture, like Aaron Sorkin's kind of a celebrity writer, Joss Whedon, Amy Sherman, but, David Simon, all these household names, becoming a writer is an even more glamorous is not the right word because there's nothing glamorous about my life, but it has become a career that more people understand as a career and want to do, right? Which means that a lot of people are going to try to teach you how to get this career, right? So the point is, a lot of people are going to try to tell you, this is the formula, this is how you succeed. And if you do it long enough, you'll realize there's no formula. There's I either succeed or I don't, doing the things that I think, and the other thing about that is, I mean, obviously you should listen to feedback. If somebody's telling your script doesn't work and, more than three people tell you the thing, then that's whatever. But ultimately you just realize there are formatting rules and the rest of it is your poetry, you know? And look, for example, somebody here is talking about whether when you write, do we show or tell? Well, tell you what, there are times when I tell you and there are times when I show you. And I use both of those tools in a very different way. I deploy those tools in a very different way. When I say, bitch, please, this is The Witcher, I'm telling you, you know, but I'm also telling you, hey, stick with me. I'm going to entertain you here. Let's go, I'm also telling you, don't assume that you understand or that you know how this show works. I do. Let me tell you how bad it's going to get, That's me engaging you in a different way. And look, even show don't tell is not a hard and fast rule, you know?
yeah, yeah,
Because there are times in scripts when I will just tell you it's terrifying.
yeah.
You
No,
know,
that's cool.
but I need to do that to convey tone, but I need to do that to do X, Y, or Z. It doesn't mean it's all I do. It's a tool that sits here in a little drawer. Maybe it's a little bit further away than the others because you don't want to use it as much, but then you go like, oh, I got to tell you,
Yeah,
you know?
I'm just going to tell you.
Yeah.
So I just want to, I'm just going to take two more questions and then we'll wrap up. Celeste says, wondering what your feelings are and what your experience on the contraction. When the momentum picked back up, did you
Mm-hmm.
see less shows, even on streaming? Network is or was brutal. Thoughts on the mini reels?
Uh, let's see. So the question, let me read I think I have the question here. Oh, also, hi, Celeste. Nice to see you, as always. Look, I used to think that being a successful writer meant you got on a huge show, you got promoted, you got a big overall deal, and you had a lot of money. And I don't see that as the measure of success anymore. The only success that I allow myself to not take for granted, but to at least take as a measure of success is that after 31 years and the things that I have done, I hope that I can at least sleep at night knowing that I will get another job. That's how I see success right now,
And Javi, you didn't see all of the promotional
Mm-hmm.
stuff that I posted, but that for me is actually one of the key things about how you write. Whatever you've done, you have managed to stay a working writer. And I mean, what would you say would be the one thing that you feel you've done
Mm.
has
Well, let
made
me let me. Well, I
that?
mean, what I
I'm sure
what I
there's not
did,
just
yeah, what
one
I did
thing.
was enter the business at a time when a white-ish writer of semi-mediocre talent was able to learn on the job. That's what I did. You can figure out what I actually did. I mean, look, I came into the business in a very different time. And one of the things that, we talk about the contraction, right? The worst part of the contraction, mini rooms and all of that stuff is this. Writers are not going on the set. Writers are not learning how to produce. I'm an executive producer on The Witcher. My deal was I was in a room for 6 months. I wrote my script. I helped the other writers write with the script. I broke story. I worked with the showrunner and the number 2 on all of this stuff. And then I leave. Now, my boss, who is Lauren Hisrich, who is one of the best showrunners I've ever worked with, made a deal with Netflix for all the writers to go to production. So contractually, we have 2 weeks to go to production. Instead, we actually folded it into a 3-week writer's room trip to London, so we could look at the sets in production and kind of, get an idea of what was going on and work together with and work on the 5th season and all of that with Lauren, right? But the problem with the contraction is as much that we have fewer shows, fewer episodes, it's also writers are being siloed into only being in the writer's room. And what you get when you get that is writers don't know how to produce. And if writers don't know how to produce, they don't know how to write to the constraints of a TV show. Even if you have a TV show like Game of Thrones and you've got $1 billion to make every episode, there are still constraints. Writers need to learn how to write to what's on set. They need to learn how to write to actors. When we were writing on the network, you had 22 episodes, you were writing while you were shooting, so you would actually know what the actors did well. And then you could course correct while writing, while shooting, I mean, I remember on one show I was writing on, we shot the first 2 episodes and the showrunner came into the room, said the actor's name, and then said, "This actor, short declarative sentences."
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go. Do that over here. Like that actor was very good at conveying emotion silently. They were very good at playing it with a look. They were not good at doing monologues. They had other strengths as an actor, and we saw them, and then we were able to course correct and pivot. Now, you're doing a show like The Witcher, all 8 scripts are done before the show goes into production. You cast someone you don't know in a part, and then, the showrunner is on set. They're juggling 5,000 things. They're not going to be able to rewrite every script to better suit the one actor.
Yeah. No,
So you need a showrunner, but you also need a writer that's capable of going on the set, knows how to talk to actors, knows how to talk to directors, knows how to rewrite for production, and knows how to write for production. That's the biggest casualty of the contraction. That's the biggest casualty of the era of streaming, is this devaluation of the writer's role, which then leads you to having things just not be as good because you don't have a writer on the set to say, this is what we meant.
You're making me think of something. I don't know if this is totally like left field, but have you ever seen like people who've worked on sets and observed, who have then become successful writers because they understand a little bit about the production process? I was just wondering about that.
Well, I think look when my first show, Sequest 2032 on NBC, right? Like just a very not stock, but a very standard high budget piece of network television, right? We shot 22 episodes of that show in each of the first 2 seasons, and then in the last season we shot 13, right? The writer went on set. I wrote 3 episodes of that show. You went on set, you talked to the actors, you prepped the show with the director. You were in the tone session with the director, so you know what the director was being told. You know what questions the director had about the script. Some of those questions you could answer better than the showrunner because it was your script, and then you're on set, you're in Video Village, and you're not lording over the director. But if you see something you don't like, you go and you talk to the director about it discreetly, so the director doesn't lose authority over the set. You want to talk to an actor about something, you tell the director, "Hey, can I tell the actor this?" The director says yes or no. Then you go to the actor, you maybe give them a little bit of guidance. They get to now understand where you're coming from as they develop the character. All that stuff is what helps you become a better writer. And if you're writing in a vacuum, it's a lot harder,
I mean, it's there's always different ways in, and different everyone's got a different journey. It's not no one's the same. So
and I've certainly met writers who began as assistant directors, or writers who began on working on set and stuff like that. That's neither here nor there. That's just
just how
but
their journey went.
But everything that you learn being on a set winds up making you a better writer, period.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a very valuable takeaway.
Mhm.
And especially maybe because, there are not a lot of, everyone's taken a little bit of a knock maybe
Mhm.
with the strike and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it filters into all aspects, but
Mhm.
maybe one can take slightly different jobs to
Right.
enhance the writing when the opportunity comes.
Mhm.
Um, and
Well, look, I
then
think
one,
the
yeah.
no,
Mm?
you go ahead. You go ahead,
No,
please.
no, say.
So the advice that I give writers nowadays, look, when I started writing, and I meant what I said, like, look, I don't believe myself to be some transcendent talent. I think that I came into the business at a very good time.
Mm,
I'm a Latino person. English is not my first language. I was born in a colony of the United States, so I guess I can say I was born in this country, but not really if you talk to Donald Trump. Um, so I got in on a diversity initiative, right? But I think part of the reason why I was so well suited to the diversity initiative is that I'm not a physical type that necessarily threatens the status quo.
mm,
I don't have an accent, I look like a lot of people in that boardroom already. That's how I got that job at the network. That's where I started. That doesn't mean they were they being bigoted or whatever. No, it just means that, I was a very good fit for that corporate culture. Then now I had a master's degree in screenwriting for USC. It's how I got the executive job that started my career. And then I got to working on shows that had 22 episode orders, right? Was I exceptionally talented? Not necessarily, but I learned on the job in a system that gave me a lot of chances to fail.
mm, mm.
And I was able to not fail in a lot of those chances, but some of them I did. And some of them I learned from those failures. But nowadays, if you go on a show, you're only 6 months on the show, you're in a writer's room and you only write one script, and that script, you don't write a good script. That's the extent of your experience.
Yeah.
You don't get to see that script shot badly. You don't get to see how the showrunner might fix that script in real time while it's shooting and all of that. Even
Mm.
those experiences of failure are learning experiences. So
Yeah, 100%. No, well, thanks for that. Um, I mean, it's very impressive, your career, and
now you're sweet, but
yeah.
I'll tell you the thing about my career is if you look at my IMDb page, it looks like, wow, what my dog is barking. Will you excuse me for a second?
No worries.
And
Renell, I want
the
to
neighbor will
ask
start complaining.
about the treatments. And Jane, I saw your hand up ages ago. I just couldn't look. I wasn't sure if you want to type something in the chat here. I can address it if you're still here.
Sorry, Eva, I'm dealing with the situation here, but the dog has been retrieved. Here she is, everybody.
Oh, sweet.
Let me
There,
let her
there,
out.
there's my dog lying on the bed.
Sweet. All right, treatments. What
Yes.
can I tell you about treatments?
What is your take on treatments? How should they be? Oh, how should they be written? And examples of some you like.
I don't think
Maybe
like there's as many
general
treatments in
question.
tele. Yeah, I think treatments is
Yeah.
more of a feature script
Mm.
thing. The closest thing that I write to a treatment is like pitches. And if you go to my page downloads, you'll see those pitches and how I write them and all of that stuff. For
Mm.
shows I've sold, shows I didn't sell, a lot of failure in that page, which is good. And
Okay.
again, it's not there to tell you that I'm great. It's there to tell you here's what I did. And
Yeah.
um,
Well, got you
but what I
somewhere.
was but what I was going to tell you about my career is you look at the IMDb page, it looks like this successful career. Many of those years, most of the years, I got one or two meetings. I maybe got one offer. I said yes to the offer. And one of the things that you people coming into the business now are not coming into the business that I came in. You're
Mm.
not going to have as many at bats as I got. You're not going to have as many episodes. You're not going to be on set as much as I was. You know, in fact, one of the reasons why, look, guys, I'm 54 years old. Back in the 90s, a lot of guys my age started kind of cashing out and washing out. You did not have a lot of people in their late 50s or in their early 60s who weren't like Steven Bochco or people who had like big established overall deal $1 million success, right? Um, so the advice that I give people coming into this world now is when I started, every agent gave you the same advice. Are you a drama writer or a comedy writer? Are you a genre writer? Are you writing fantasy, sci-fi, and horror and sitting at the little kids table? Or are you writing cop shows and sitting at the big boys table? Figure out which one you are, write in that and stay in your lane. So very early on, I said, I'm a drama writer. I want to do genre. I hate that you think that's a look at stable. You're an idiot for it, but I won't fire you because you're a good agent. Okay.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I feel like you need to be kind of a polymath. I think that you know, if you're starting now, you should know how to write comic books. You should know how to write video games. You should know how to write short stories. If somebody says write a play, you should figure out how to do that. Professional writing, especially in the next few years, is going to be about a lot of doing things that don't seem to be exactly television, you know, like video games, like content and all of that. But to keep a steady career going, you're going to have to be able to go into different fields because TV is just not offering the continuity of employment that it did when I was around, you know? And that's the
Yeah.
reason why continuity of employment to me now is my only metric of success. Can I keep earning yearly what I need to make my mortgage, to keep, you know, to keep feeding my kids and, you know, the dog and whatever, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not chasing the overall deal anymore as a working writer. I'm chasing being a working writer.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think that's what a lot of people are going for, at the
yeah.
moment. It's the reality is like you say, it was different. But I really, really love what you say, like just all different mediums. If you're a writer,
Yeah.
you're a writer and explore it
Yeah.
because the world is changing as well. And
Yep.
yeah, well, I think that's a great way to kind of end off. And
Okay.
thank you so, so much for your time. I'm sure
Oh, thank you.
well, I got a lot out of it. I'll go back and listen to it as well. I didn't get to all the questions, but
I mean,
I'm
do you want to throw in another one?
yeah,
Because, you know,
let's maybe see because some of the questions, yeah.
I mean,
Um,
I'm here for another half hour. So if you have more,
okay. All right.
I'm happy to keep going.
So
If people want
maybe,
to trail out, whatever you want.
yeah, whoever wants to stay on a little bit, that's fine.
Mhm.
And then I also just want to mention, I'm sure you all know, I am the luckiest person in the world because Javi is going to be a mentor at Screenwriters Safari in September. Um, yeah, I hope you're as excited as we are, Javi.
Oh yeah.
It's quite a
I'm
privilege.
hoping to see a wildebeest.
Oh yeah, no, I can, yeah, you should see one. But I'm not going to say anything because it's not like a zoo, and you never know what you're going to see or what you aren't
I
going to
know.
see.
Yeah.
Suzanne is coming for the second time. She
Mhm.
was on here, so she would be able to tell you that. But yeah, it's a big weekend, I tell you, for all my mentors. It's Joey Tushio's 40th birthday. I mean, that's huge. And we all love Joey because he's an advocate for screenwriters like nobody else. He really, really is the one person that can help everyone, take those steps for their next career.
Yeah.
And besides all the millions of dogs he saves, we all know that. We love Joey. Um, and then, of course, Meg LaFoe, it's her launch weekend for Inside Out 2. If you haven't seen
Mhm.
it, go and see it. I saw it yesterday in 3D. It was amazing. So that is huge. And her and Lorene are launching their screenwriting live podcast, I think, as we speak. And on Patreon. So that's something to explore as well. And yeah, I just wanted to mention those, but those of you who want to drop off, let's carry on with a couple of questions.
Sure.
And guys, I've got one more spot left for the safari if anyone's keen to take it. So you can just drop me a note if you want it. But it's the last one and it's the last retreat I'm doing. So this is your one and only chance. Okay, now on that note, let's see what Florentia is asking. Can you talk about
Mhm.
TV pitch documents? I see
Yes.
people. Okay, so we spoke about that. To
I mean, I
look,
can talk more.
yeah, yeah, which
I
I
think that if you look, I have published the majority of mine. And if you go to the site, you can also, there's a pitch there that Jose Molina and I did. Jose and I had a podcast called Children of Tendu. And we actually probably will record another episode. It's very sporadic nowadays. We kind of said everything we needed to say. But you can actually go there and hear a pitch that we did. And literally,
wait,
because
which one is it? Is it under downloads? Oh, here we go.
it's under
Here,
downloads. Yeah, it's called
so
Degenesis.
guys, it's here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
knock
and we
themselves
actually
out.
did a podcast. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Eve.
Uh-uh. I'm just saying, everyone can knock themselves out. There's so much
Yeah.
here.
It's a lengthy pitch and it's a pre-pandemic pitch. So it has that flaw of being a very lengthy pitch. And post-pandemic pitches have gotten a little bit shorter, although they want you to figure out even more. So you can go look at that in terms of pitch documents. I absolutely forgot the question. Is it anything specific about pitch? Or how do I feel about them?
Let's just go back there.
Mhm.
Can you talk about TV pitch documents? I see people using pitch decks and lookbooks
Mhm.
interchangeably, as well as
Yeah.
show Bibles, which I know is not what they actually want.
Look,
Maybe they do. I don't know.
mhm. The world is changing, and people now do things like ask you for pitch document, like pitch decks and stuff. Everybody makes a pitch deck and all that. Make a pitch deck. It's great. Make a pitch deck. Use AI, get a stock image, whatever. Make a mood board. And all that. Fine.
Yeah. Oh,
When
I
you're
mean,
pitching something,
anything visual. I mean, you can't go wrong. It's just
sure. I
that
mean,
there's a
yeah.
lot of
The
work.
reason I'm making this face like I smell the fart about pitch decks and stuff like that is that ultimately you're selling. Here's what you're selling when you go to pitch something. Okay, and the pitch deck can be helpful or it's not. I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
50% of what you're selling is your material. The other 50% is I am the person who can take you to the promised land here. If you give me this money, and that's when you go to pitch something, you're applying for a loan. You're saying, give me my pilot quote. I don't know what the lowest pilot quote is per the minimum basic agreement, but it can be anywhere from $50,000 to write a pilot. Some high-end writer, Shonda Rhimes write a pilot is probably $1 million, right? You're asking for anywhere from 50 to $1 million. And you're saying, I am the person who, if you give me this money, will give you a script that you're going to love, that you're going to want to make. And with my stewardship, we will all get to the promised land. So what does that mean? It means that if you have a pitch deck and it helps you convey that message, great. If you have a pitch deck and it distracts from what you're telling people, right? Because ultimately, whether it's via Zoom, whether it's in person, a pitch is you selling you. I came up with this story. I'm going to write the script. I'm going to tell you how I'm going to write it. And and you're going to love me so much from how I present myself here that I'm going to be the first call you make. Like if you have bad news for me and good news for, I don't know, any one of these people who's been Me Too'd out of the business or whatever, some other difficult showrunner, I want you to call me with bad news first, because that'll be a more fun call. Okay. That's what you're selling in a pitch. You're selling, I know this world, I know this material, I can write it, and the way that I describe it to you is going to convince you of all of these things, and I'm going to be a great collaborator with you. Give me $250,000, please. That's what a pitch is. So the decks, the visuals, the this, on the Degenesis pitch, we had a visual. We made a little 5-minute movie. It's great. We didn't sell the pitch. I don't know if it helped or hindered. It was nice. But I don't know. I mean,
But
ultimately,
nobody looks at you like, why don't you have one? Is
no,
that what you're saying?
because
It's nice to
ultimately,
have,
yeah,
but it's not like you
yeah,
kind of judge negatively for not having one.
no, no.
Okay.
And in terms, one-page pitch document, no, not useful. No, you're either pitching or you're not. I mean, in a one-page, I mean, yeah, you can have a one-page document, but what's that for? Is it to give it to somebody? I don't know. The way that a lot of these things happen now, my agents do say, well, can you give me a log line or tell me what the area is, and I'll write a little paragraph for them that then they can go, because now a lot of the tedium of pitching now is that they'll literally say like, well, can you give us a log line so we can decide whether we want to hear the pitch? And maybe the one page is good for that. Or maybe you write just the one paragraph in the log line so your agent's saying exactly what you want them to say and not summarizing something. My problem with a lot of the pitch documents and things like that is like people read them and then they go tell their boss what the show is, and it can be whatever.
Yeah, because you don't actually get the
Mm.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I want you to go to your boss and say, we heard this great pitch. It's about this. And the way the guy pitched it, holy crap. Like, I think this person's really going to write a great script.
Yeah, for sure. It's
So
very
have the visuals, have the visuals, have the one pager. Sure. I don't know what for, but have it. Sure. If it helps you know your story, by the way, all of these things, if it helps you know your story better, the reason you write most of this stuff down is so that, because a pitch is a performance, and it's a sales performance. And it's all about how you make eye contact with people in the room. You don't just make eye contact with the VP. You also make eye contact with the assistant who's taking notes. See if you can get them to laugh. Because when the VP asks the assistant what they thought of the pitch, you want them to like you, So you don't go and just single out the one person you know as the buyer. You talk to everybody because you don't know who in that room is going to be the next president of the network. You don't know, and because you treat everybody with respect, and because everyone in that room is a collaborator. You know, um, when I was a network executive, I was the most junior person in the room every time I was in the room. Okay. What no one knew is that the VP that I was going into pitches with didn't know anything about science fiction. So when there was a science fiction pitch, the pitch would end, the people would go and he'd go, "Was that any good?" And I'd be like, "Eh," you know.
They didn't know
And
that
if
you
you
were
were the
there to help him.
yeah, and if you were the kind of pitcher who only talked to the VP of the network because you know they had the money, and you thought Shemp over there taking notes is an idiot, I don't need to talk to that guy. Well, maybe I wouldn't be so nice about your pitch, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So look, a lot of what you're pitching is, this is who I am, this is the fun you're going to have working with me, this is how I treat everybody, and here's my great show, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's a good lead into this question here. Could you talk about the hierarchy of a TV writer's room and each level's responsibilities? I mean,
Sure.
yeah.
Well, I mean, look, right nowadays it's all bets are off. I mean, I've worked with executive producer people, no, not EPs, but co-EP people who've never been on a set or who don't know how to reach a budget, you know, read a budget. Um, right now, you go on a show, you do 8 episodes, you get promoted on the next show because you've got good agents. Next thing you know, you're producer level, you cost a shit ton of money, you don't have any experience. You know, in the old school system, there was a much more of a apprentice to master wheel, which there's a vestigial thing of that left over, which is the lowest rank is staff writer. What's your job as a staff writer? Mostly you go and you listen, you pitch, you listen, you see how other people communicate their ideas. That's, you know, then you become a story editor. Now, story editor is a rank that is left over from soap operas and old-timey TV shows where most of the scripts were freelance, but you actually had a story editor who would write outlines of what the script was supposed to be and give them to either a staff writer or a freelancer to write the outline. That's just, you're just the next guy up from a staff writer. Then you get executive story editor, same thing. You're just the next person up. Okay. Once you get from executive story editor to co-producer, 2 things happen. One of them is you stop being paid by the week and you start being paid by the episode. So the way you're paid changes because a co-producer is somebody who's supposed to be there to learn how to produce. Co-producer level person, you're supposed to be there. You start learning how to run a writer's room, you know, how to work in production, how to work with directors. You know, you start, so then you become a producer, a supervising producer, a co-executive producer, and an executive producer. By the time you're an executive producer, you need to be able to do every job. You need to be able to run the room, go to set, go to post, go to editing, go to color timing, go to an ADR session, and know how to deal with people, how to behave, how to treat other people. So as you go up that hierarchy, your job is to actually learn as much about how the show is made so that it affects your writing, it affects how you interface with the other writers, it affects what kind of stories you develop with the other writers, and it affects how you go on set and how you deal with people, you know. So what staff writer, story editor, executive story editor, co-producer, producer, supervising producer, co-EP, EP, what that indicates is the higher you go, the more you should know about how and why shows are made the way that they're made. And if you get to co-EP and you don't have that knowledge, you know, you're going to be catching up.
Yeah, you've actually got a brilliant essay about showrunners.
Yes.
And
Well, I don't know if it's brilliant, but I have, yeah.
well,
Thank
the
you.
reason I liked it is because you basically described the room and a whole show and the showrunner. It's like a corporate office, just
Yeah.
in banking. I can tell you, it was like you literally replicated all the issues, the respect, the hierarchies, and everything. And so I found that a very interesting read for any of you who are keen on reading that.
Yeah, that's an essay called "The 11 Laws of Showrunning."
Yep.
It's in my webpage, and I
Yeah.
wrote it because, well, first of all, I've worked for a crap ton of sociopathic abusers who didn't know their job, but also because there is a delicatessen in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is the best delicatessen in the world, and it's called Zingerman's Deli. And the reason I love it is because the guy who started Zingerman's Deli also wrote a book called "A Lapsed Anarchist's Approach to Being a Better Leader." Now, Zingerman's has gone from being like a little storefront deli to being an empire that includes a deli, a creamery, a restaurant, a bake shop, a management training school, a coffee roaster, all this stuff. Management training is really important. So if you want to be a great showrunner, read Ari Weinzweig's book, A Lapsed Anarchist's Guide to Being a Better Leader, because what Ari talks about in this, I don't know if he's Ari or Ari. I met him once in person, and I'll tell you how I met this guy in person. I went to the Zingerman's restaurant in Ann Arbor. It's my hometown. It's called the Roadhouse. And this guy comes up to bus our table, and the person I'm with says, hey, Harry, that was the guy who owns the entire business and runs that entire empire. Literally, he rotates between jobs at the restaurants, and so that he can be in the trenches knowing what it is that everybody does, not doing it better, not showing them how to do it, just doing it. Okay. Does that mean as an EP, as a showrunner, you need to go into the costume room and start sewing? No. But what it means is that as a manager and even as a creative partner, you're in a position of service. Too many people look at becoming a showrunner as great. Now I can finally become the monster I always knew I could be. And they think it's some sort of stately, kingly title that now you're the showrunner and everybody's going to cater to you. No, the showrunner has one job, and that job is to serve the staff and the heads and everyone who works on the show by giving them the vision of what the show is supposed to be. The only thing that makes a showrunner special is that they created the show, they know what the show is, and they're the only people who are able to tell others how to make the show, not how to make the show, but what it is they should be making. Your understanding of yourself as a servant leader and not as a royal presence to be genuflected to determines how good a showrunner you can be and how you train people, you know?
Yeah,
So
there's so many laws in your essay that are transferable to every company basically
absolutely.
on earth,
Yeah, absolutely.
managerial and leadership skills.
Because ultimately, I'm sorry, Eve, I keep cutting you off. I apologize.
No, I'm listening to you.
I think that, look, the thing writers don't get, at least very early on, and some never get it, is that just as the script and the pitch are loan applications, right? When you sell a show, you become the CEO of a startup. It doesn't matter whether you're a great artist. You can be a great artist, but you're still the leader of a corporation, and you have an operating budget that can run up to $200 million. I think it's the most expensive show that not that I've been involved with, but that you have up to 300 employees. You have a physical plant where a product is made, and you are the boss of that. Whether you like it or not, whether if you think you're a great artist who must be genuflected to, good for you. You're still the leader of a corporation and an artist. And you need to know how to juggle those things. So the 11 laws of showrunning I wrote just to give some practical, actionable advice on how to actually be a manager, and not being a sensitive artist who must bear the burden of telling people what the show is, and it's also a plea for humility. It's a plea for fucking put your ego aside and look at what you're really doing here, so.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I want to get that book from you. And Theoline, so Theoline, she came to last year's safari, and she actually got representation through
Great.
one of Joey's managers, and she's the last question, feels appropriate. Any advice? So Theoline is South African. Any advice for an international writer trying to break into the US market, writer's room, with or without a manager or agent? There'll be a lot of South African writers here as well, and we struggle, and this is like a great question.
No, I mean, you're in a smaller business than, the American television business, working on a different scope, and there's probably a very different set of rules and parameters about how you get a job. Look, breaking into the American market is difficult. I wish that I could give you a magic bullet and tell you exactly what to do. I actually don't.
Yeah,
I think working with people like Joey is very good. Yeah. No, look, and there's a great story that I heard in an interview. It was from the costume designer of Bonnie and Clyde. And Bonnie and Clyde was one of the 1970s new wave of directors, very documentary style, very gritty, very violent. And the costume designer was at the Universal Pictures warehouse looking for stuff to for pieces to use in the movie, and runs into Edith Head. Now, hopefully everybody knows who Edith Head is, but for those of you who don't, Edith Head was the doyen of costume design. Like, she was somebody who started work when it was like, a credit would be like gowns by Edith Head, like literally she was the Coco Chanel of American
she was like a
design.
fashionista, like she a trendsetter. I think I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah.
So this costume designer sees Edith Head, and Edith Head says, "Oh, what are you working on?" And the costume designer says, "Oh, it's a 1920s period piece." And Edith Head goes, "1920s? Oh, do it all in chiffon." And then she sort of waltzes out of there, right? All of which is to say, um, I don't want to be the Edith Head in your life. I don't want to be the person who tone deafly says, "Well, you just get a manager and you'll be fine."
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So
but that's the thing. The
rather,
truth is
yeah,
the truth.
rather than give you a piece of tone deaf advice, I will give you do you still need to live in LA? I think primarily you do, but your mileage will vary. I know people who Zoom into writers' rooms now and all of that. Look, I think ultimately there are ways of getting your material in front of a manager, like doing things like Writer's Roadmap is one of them, doing things like seminars where you actually get to meet people, entering writing competitions, like trying to get in a writer's fellowship here, NBC, ABC, all of the major companies have writers fellowships, writers opportunity things, and all of that. Those are becoming the royal road to getting a staff writing gig, honestly. You may have to move to LA for a while and then go back to wherever you're from and then come back when you get another job, because jobs don't last a year anymore. They last 6 months. They last 22 weeks. It's just a different world. And geography is not as big a deal, but LA is a place where you may have to be in order to do this job at a certain point. The advice that I've given my entire life to anybody breaking in is always the same. You can't, you're going to figure out who to talk to. You're going to go to the right seminar. You're going to enter the right competition. You're going to enter the right fellowship, and they're going to take you. You're going to move to LA and meet a guy who knows a guy who gets a script in front of the manager. You're going to have a writers group where somebody's going to get a manager because they knew a guy, and then that guy will get you that's there is no one way of getting this career, and you probably know about as much about how to meet people and enter into it as I would if I were starting out right now. Okay. But the one thing you can control is, are you great on the page? Can you be a better writer? Is this the best sample I have? Is this the best version of who I am on the page to give to the world? Success in the entertainment industry is the intersection of strange luck and preparation, you know? And my entire career can be summed up with strange luck and preparation. I got the job on Lost. My career was in the toilet. I had done a pilot at Warner Brothers that had failed horribly. I was literally blacklisted at Warner Brothers for 12 years because this pilot turned out so poorly. I got on a show called Jake 2.0, which I got on because I'd worked with Silvio Orta, who had created a show I had worked on. He liked me to the point where he literally wrote me a birthday card that said, I think you're great. I love your writing, blah, blah, blah. But mostly I'm just happy your career went into the toilet because I could hire you on my show. Okay. I love Silvio. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. So here's the thing. Jake 2.0 airs on the same night, airs on UPN, which was one of the old networks. It got folded into the CW now. It was the network where America's Next Top Model started. And we were preempted one night, and they ran a rerun of America's Next Top Model in our time slot. And Jake 2.0 was such an unsuccessful show that a rerun of America's Next Top Model doubled our rating.
Because it was in the same slot.
Yes.
Okay.
We didn't have a new episode, so instead of rerunning one of our episodes, they reran an America's Next Top Model in our time slot. It did twice our rating, a rerun. So the next day, the showrunner gets a call from the network president. He comes out of his office at around 11:30 and says, "Can everybody just meet in the writer's room?" And I shouted, "Are we canceled?" And I'm like, "Oh shit." We were out of that office at 4:30 the next day with our stuff in bankers' boxes. That was in, I think, late January, early February of 2004, around the exact same time that Lost was greenlit off of an outline. They didn't even have a script yet, and they needed to put together a writer's room to figure out the show. And everybody had been, most writers were either staffed or whatever. So they were looking at a pool of writers who weren't staffed, because that was when you had network shows, staffing season, all that crap. And it turned out I was available. And even though I was kind of damaged goods, they looked at me and said, "This guy's good at genre. We can get him cheap. Let's put him in the writer's room,"
Hey.
So,
Well,
I mean, your job is to be as good as you can on the page, and then to invite strange luck into your life by going to the webinars, going to the seminars, talking to people, being on Screenwriters Twitter, being on Screenwriters Reddit, knowing the guy who knows the guy. Like it's you know, it's all some version of that.
Yeah. No, well, thanks for that. And Theoline, I know you, and just carry on doing what you're doing, because you do a lot of that and you write. So okay, guys. Well, I think that's a wrap. And thank you so much to everybody for attending. And yeah, just
And
have a great weekend. There's a lot going on. So, and anything you want to say, Javi, as your parting
just
words?
thanks to all of you who joined the webinar and are here, and thank you all for listening. And look, I try to put as much stuff out there so that people like you can look at it. If there's anything to learn from it, and move forward. So I hope what I had to say is useful, and I hope that what I have to share on my website is useful as well.
It is. Thank you so much.
Cool.
And
All
I'll
right.
send out the recording, guys. Okay. Have
All right.
a
Take care.
fabulous weekend, and I'll see you all on the socials soon. Okay. Bye. Bye.